So the other day I was looking at Dota 2 Pro Tracker and I looked at the most successful heroes, very normal stuff here, kind of these things I would expect. Well, except for these two with the very low pick rate, but whatever, that's just random chance. But then I saw this. Beastmaster with a pretty decent pick rate and really high win rate, 55%. Especially, I saw that CEST was being very successful, the hero. It is his most played hero recently, and he's having a very high win rate here. 10 games won and 3 lost only. So in this video we're going to take a look at what makes CEST so successful. It's Beastmaster, item build, skill build, is laning, general game plan, which creeps you want to take, and so on. So let's first talk about skill build. CEST almost always goes for the skill build. It's very straightforward. You max out Call of the Wild first, then Inner Beast second, and you ignore talents at the start, get Wild Access next. Of course, you get always Prime Roll when you can. And then at level 15, you actually get the level 15 talent, not the level 10 talent. And then at level 16, you get the level 10 talent. And this plus 350 health is very strong. It applies to both your hero and also all your summons and creeps. So this is very strong. And movement speed is generally a bit more useful than damage, but both these level 10 talents are not that great, which is why we skip the talent at level 10. At level 20, he goes for the Primal Roll cooldown. Board damage at this stage of the game is no longer that relevant, so you rather just have our ultimate more often, and then the attack speed aura, however, is still quite nice, especially for other cores to have, so this is what you get at level 25. I haven't actually seen CEST do this, but I would alternate this build a bit if I'm playing a hero like Chen or Enchantress that can just steal our boars. In that case, I would level up probably 2 levels in Wild Access while holding off an Inner Beast and then maxing out Call the Wild next, and then finishing off the Inner Beast, and then sort of rely more on the access in the laning stage, but we still want to get that power spike from level 4 or the Wild Boar, so we get those instead of Inner Beast. On to the item builds. Here, CEST is a bit more flexible, depends a lot on what kind of lane he's facing. Starting items, sometimes he just goes to lane without items. The idea here being that you want to rush Helm with Dominator, and if you get the Helm of Anvil very fast, then you don't really need to have regen. This is especially recommendable if it's not going to be a very tough lane and you have some sort of position 4 that can share some regen with you. But if you don't have that, you want to buy some starting items. For example, something like this, a Tango, Quelling Blade, a couple of branches, a Salve, a Mango. This is a fairly efficient use of your gold. It doesn't actually spend all your gold. You're still going to have 100 gold left. So you can still get fairly early to that Temple Dominator. But if you can get away with buying fewer items at the start, you should, because you really want that Dominator timing. So to be honest, I totally dismissed this Dominator item in this patch. I thought the item was really bad, but it turns out that with these kind of melee offlaners, rushing from Dominator very, very early is actually quite viable and allows you just the regen that it gives you, the armor that it gives you, allows you to do quite well in lane. And if you have this very early Dominator, it can be quite a powerful timing, especially here like Beastmaster that obviously has a lot of synergy with those dominated creeps. What CEST gets after the Dominator varies a bit, but generally he's going to get something like Boots, Aegis Mask, and an Infused Raindrop. Just some cheap items to get some mana regen, which Beastmaster can need once he gets the Primal Roll. He might also go for like a Ring of Basilius, which can later be upgraded into Vlad's. But in any case, if he can get away with it, he's going to go for a fast Helm of the Overlord. This is also an item I kind of dismissed initially, but now that it gives you the access to 2 ancient creeps, it's actually quite good if you can get it early on a hero like Beastmaster that has so much synergy with an item like this. So yeah, this is actually quite good. The problem with this item is that it has an abysmal build-up. So you go from this item, which has a very nice build-up, very nice for the lane, to this, which has Ultimate Orb, one of the least efficient items in the game, and then a very expensive recipe. So We want to have some cheap items in between, something like this. CEB doesn't usually do this, but you can also get a stick, which is very strong. And also throw in something like a windlace, a very efficient item as well. Sometimes CEB also gets a Medallion of Courage on the way towards Helm of the Overlord, which is of course an item that synergizes really well with Beastmaster, also helps with our mana problems. So this is also a very nice stepping stone item. But in games where he's having a really hard time, he might buy some more expensive item on the way towards Dominator. Something like, for example, Hood of Defiance. I've seen him buy in one game where there's a lot of magic burst damage in the enemy team. So something like this might be required on the way towards Helm 2. After Helm of the Overlord, the item build becomes a lot more flexible. So you always want Aghanim Shard at some point, although not necessarily as the next item, but it's just a very powerful upgrade, and it makes your Hawks so much stronger. You get much lower cooldown on the Hawks. It halves your cooldown on the Hawks and allows them to have this dive bomb ability, which is a very nice, handy stun. It's a 2-second stun, and you gotta send out one of these Hawks every 15 seconds. This gives you so much more vision, and as well as this very strong stun, you can use it to do things like set up a couple of Hawks around an important area, like if you're doing Rosh, or if you're pushing or defending high ground, you can have several Hawks built up in an area and then use them when the team fight breaks out. So this shard is something you always want to get, but not necessarily always right after the Helm of Overlord. You could also instead get another item first, like Blink Dagger is quite nice. It allows you to get better initiation with Primal Roar. You might get a Solar Crest, obviously works really well with Beastmaster. Or you might get a Vlad, also an item that just fits you really well. And Vlad is something that CEB usually goes for, whether it's early or a little bit later, but this is just a really strong Beastmaster item, and it's something he usually builds. Then of course at some point you want to have a BKB probably, so you can actually survive during fights. And there's also a bunch of other items that are situationally strong, like Kevin's Halberd for example, or something like a Lotus Orb is always a viable option. Later on you can also buy something a little bit more luxury items, like Scythe for example, or even something like an AC if none of your one or two wants to buy it. So there's a bunch of options in the very late game, but this is sort of the standard stuff that CEB usually goes for. Enough of the theory, let's see how this actually looks in a couple of games. Rebreak of Equilibrium is quite important for Beastmaster because it's not that strong, level 1. This bow is level 1 and not that great. So he usually prioritizes blocking over fighting for runes. And so gets this very nice equilibrium here, somewhere in the middle of the lane. And he's going to use his bow primarily at the start, primarily to harass enemy heroes, and especially like a ranged support. Ancient Apparition is going to be more vulnerable to this damage from the bow. Those melee heroes with a damage block are going to take a lot less damage from the bow. At the start you want to play a bit defensively and focus primarily on just getting last hits and denies, but if an opponent gets out of position, you might be able to get a kill here, and they almost get the kill on this AA. But then once you get to level 3, your bows become a lot stronger, their damage output actually doubles, and against melee heroes more than doubles. So this is where you reach your first little power spike. The two biggest power spikes are when you get your Helm of Dominator and when you get your level 6. Usually, of course, you get Dominator a bit earlier than level 6, but it depends a bit on how many starting items you bought and how the lane went. So once you have the Dominator, you want to of course look for a creep, and it's worth usually leaving the lane a little bit for that. You can leave a support in the lane and go and find a creep for yourself. The best creep to find at the start would be the big Hellbear. Any other big creep is fine too. Centaur is very great once you have the Primal Roar available, which is not the case. Other good creeps at the start include the Harpy, which, especially if it's night, gives you nice night vision, and with all the mana regen the creeps get, you can spam lots of lightnings. But yeah, these creeps, all these creeps pretty strong, all these big creeps. This one helps to catch up, and the skeletons actually also do quite a bit of damage. In a pinch, the Alpha Wolf is also not bad. The aura here, of course, works really nice with your attack speed aura. But in the very early game, it's not that great. But once you get to the mid game, this Alpha Wolf becomes quite powerful. And ideally, your lane goes like this. You get maybe a couple of kills, you get your early Dominator, and you take an early tower here. And then after you take your own tower, you want to rotate to the other lanes and try to take the other tier 1 towers. The mid tower if possible, or otherwise this tower is fine too. So if your safe lane is at a bad time, as is the case here, Ursa can now rotate to the bottom, whereas you can now take the farm at the top and sort of the harder farm at the top and allow your carry to catch up a bit. But let's say you're in a game that isn't going quite as well. Here, Ceb is just trying to finish off his Helm of Dominator. It's coming out on the carry, and he's trying to already position himself in the forest so he can already take a good creep. But unfortunately, the carry gets sniped. So now he's going to be without his Dominator for almost 2 minutes. This is a bit of a disaster, but you just need to not panic and just play this calmly. Try to get a level 6. You're going to get a nice timing with level 6 plus Dominator. And then you can still hopefully mount a comeback. But as you can see, it's not going that well. There's not much you can really do. Invested all this in the Dominator that he didn't get. So yeah, he dies here, which is unfortunate. But at least he's going to be able to respawn with his Dominator. He's alive, he's going to go right away, grab a creep. If this camp was not there, he would probably go here and take a creep from here. Even though he's died once, he's still doing fine as far as the farm is concerned. And he can now still play aggressively here. Overlord, of course, can also kill him with Chronosphere +1. But Beastmaster is a hero that has to be respected. So he's just going to farm some of these camps, push in his wave. And on his own, he's probably not going to be able to kill Faceless Void. But if he gets some sort of +1, he can. And this is just arriving here in the form of this Lina. So they're just waiting around here, Lina trying not to show herself, and meanwhile he's just pushing. This is what you want to do. You want to force people to come deal with you, because at this stage of the game you're extremely powerful. Even though the game is on the whole not going that well, they're behind in net worth, still this level 6 Beastmaster with a nice centaur creep is incredibly powerful. But there's some rotations coming in here, so they have to respect that. Ideally you're going to play this momentum based Dota where you push all the towers, but in some games that's just not possible. So in this game, for example, they're down by 4k, and Ceb has been forced into going Hell of Defiance because there's so much magic burst on the enemy team, and it's going to delay his Helm of the Overlord. But it's better to have this than just run around only with Dominator for 20 minutes. And he's just going to farm, and Beastmaster farms fairly fast with Dominator, so this is not too terrible. The enemy team has tried to gank Beastmaster, but now they're forced to retreat, and with the entire team coming in, you can take a fight here. And you see, even though they're down in net worth, Beastmaster doesn't have a creep right now, this fight is still going okay. This is like a 5 versus 5 fight. Vitric even arriving a bit late here, and they're still doing fine. Speaking of Vitric arriving late, I'm Vitric, I'm just going to deward here. Nothing's bad is going to happen to me. Oops. And there's the 1-for-1. But it's fine. When you're down 3k, trading 1-for-1 is great. The most important thing is when you're down is don't panic. You don't want to do a desperate push that have no chance of succeeding. Just play it out calmly, try to hit your item timings, get this Overlord at a reasonable time, and then maybe you can win the game still with some good fights. Because you always have BKB piercing, ultimate that's always going to be strong, no matter what stage of the game you're in. So don't think too much of Beastmaster as an early game hero. You can win in the early game with pushing, but you don't have to. Speaking of Primal, it's also important not to waste it. So here this Tiny is completely caught out. There's no real chance of escaping, so he's just going to save the roar in case someone decides to fight for this, if the enemy team is behind Tiny somewhere, you're still gonna have Raw. Once you have a few points in wild access, you can use them to help you farm. The way you do this is you position yourself so that you hit your own creep camp and also hit another creep camp to lure them towards you, like we just saw here. And it's gonna speed up your farming a bit, but of course only do this if you have enough mana. You don't want to waste all your mana on wild access and not have mana for your primary war and for your Call of the Wild. Once you get your Helm of the Overlord, the number one priority creep to get is the Ancient Thunderhide, primarily for its extra attack speed ability, and its slam is also quite nice. But if you can't get that, the Big Dragon is also quite nice. It's great for farming, for split pushing. It also can be kind of useful in team fight. It's basically like the Aghanim's ability, the Aghanim Shard ability from Dragon Knight, except in a slightly smaller AoE. But you know, this group is great. It also has a armor aura. If you can't get either of those two, the Granite Golem is fine. It has a 15% HP aura, which is nice to have. But yeah, this is the one you really want. And then also Centaurs is still very nice to have for their stun, which pairs up perfectly with your Primal Roar, as well as the Alpha Wolf. That's also great. But if you can't get those S tier creeps, there's a couple of other creeps that are nice to have, like the Ogre Frost Mage, a very powerful creep. The Ghost is kind of okay to have. It's a frost attack. It also does piercing damage, so it's really good at clearing creeps. This one can be situationally useful for its Purge ability. That's a basic dispel on allies or enemies, as well as a slow on enemies. It can also, of course, pierce Lincolns. This one can also pierce Lincolns. Also has a full night vision. That's really great. You can also get the Cobalt Taskmaster for the movement speed aura. Don't see one of those right now. So there's a couple of creeps that are kind of useful and nice to have. Let's talk briefly about control groups. So you want to have definitely control groups set up for your units. If you don't know what control groups are, they're here in the settings. Control groups, you can set whatever hotkey you want here, and there's also more control groups here and advanced hotkeys here. So for me, these control groups just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the way you do this is you select a couple of units, and then you can press Control 1, for example, and then these units are bound on 1. So you can select those units by pressing 1, and you can center on them by double pressing 1. And the game also remembers this control group, so I've previously set up my boars to be as control group 2, so I can just press 2 now, and then the boar is going to be selected. Same goes for Dominator creeps. So I've set my Dominator creeps on control group 3, so all my Dominator creeps, no matter which creeps I take, are always going to be on 3 for Beastmaster. This also persists between games, so you can just set this up once, and it's also always going to be like that. And then once you have Aghanim shards, you also want to have a control group for your hawks. So these would be on 4 for me. So now I can press 4 and then just use those abilities by tabbing. And yeah, so that's how I would set up my control groups for Beastmaster. I'm not sure exactly how CEST does it, but yeah, something like that should be what you want to have. Especially once you have your shard ready, you want to be spamming out Call of the Wild, provide vision for your team in key areas, as well as setting up those birds to be able to stun people. So this is one of the primary things that makes Beastmaster so strong, especially at high levels when vision becomes even more important. And this is also why, if there's no change, I expect we're going to see quite a bit of Beastmaster at TI. Because just all this vision that these hawks with that very low cooldown provide is going to be very decisive in many cases. So this is something you can do. You can push out lanes just with your creeps while you stay in the shadows here. This allows you to just be a bit safer, and also if like a single hero comes in into this lane, you might be able to get a kill with Primal Roar. These Shartoks are especially strong when it comes to Roche fights, because then they give you a lot of very important vision and allow you to sort of set up for fights. And yeah, obviously jumping on a hero like Drow Ranger is the best thing you can do. And just look at all this vision they have thanks to these Hawks, and they are able to win this fight for now, but the buyback's coming in. Because Beastmaster are very strong at doing Roche. You don't want to be in the Roche pit yourself, but you want to actually keep this Ancient Thunderhide nearby and keep buffing up that Terror Blade. That's a bit of a mistake that CEB makes here. Should not be chasing with a Thunderhide here. But other than that, it's going really well. Has a bit of a try to steal Roshan, but it does not quite work out. So they win the Roche fight, get a couple of kills there, and from there on out, the game is going to be quite easy. When you're pushing high ground, you don't want to be in the front lines unless everyone is dead. You can have like a lesser value creep like the Granite one here in the front lines. This one should probably be a bit farther back because it's kind of important to just be constantly buffing up the Terror Blade with that. Meanwhile, he's standing here nearby, still close enough to buy the aura, but far enough away that he's fairly safe and able to initiate or counter-initiate with a Blink Roar. Once you've got some of your core items, you can think about some more luxury stuff, like Boots of Travel is a great item to get on Beastmaster, because you can Boots of Travel onto your Hawks. That's very powerful. And it also means that if you have a Beastmaster on your team, it's great for your teammates to actually get Boots of Travel. They also can benefit from that. Refresher also a possibility if your Primal Roar is really important, like in a game like this. If you just locked in as Drow Ranger, that's going to make everything so much easier. So in this case, Refresher might be the way to go. And the good thing is Beastmaster actually can afford to buy Refresher because Primal Roar is not that expensive on the mana cost. Yeah, to be perfectly frank, I would actually prefer BKB in a game like this. There's all these silences, it's like multiple silences here, and all that is able from like Mars and stuff like that. I would really like a BKB over the Refresher. Again, you're pushing high ground, you don't want to be too far forward, you want to be in the back, maybe have a creep at the front. Here this Global Foreman is not the most crucial creep here. We can afford to lose it, even though it has a nice aura. Yeah, they take the melee racks and able to disengage without any losses. So that is how you play Beastmaster in 7.29d. And hopefully 7.30 is going to come out soon, but I'm not counting on it any longer. But if you want to see me play some Beastmaster, you can do so on my stream on Sunday, which depending on when this video comes out, it's going to be today or tomorrow. So tune in at twitch.tv/Gunnarsson, and I'll also be doing replay analysis of your replays that you sent in to me. So go check it out, and Overlord's willing, I'll see you there.